The goal in this task is to create a script that reads a number and that validates that it is a correct number, and the number shall be a float. And I have created this flowchart for how we can solve the task. But before we start solving it, we need a new script. And now if we take a look at the flowchart, we can see that, all right, we're supposed to read a number. Then we're going to check if it's a correct number or not. And if it is a bad input, we're going to display an error message and read a new number and check if that is an okay number. And if it is, then we're going to display a confirmation. And then we end the script. And now that I'm going to start implementing it, I think I'm going to start with reading the number, displaying an error message or a confirmation. So I will skip the loop to start with, and we will add that when we see that we can read these numbers, because this part here is the part which use error handling, and I want to get that down first. So I'll write a little bit of code and then we can take a look at what we have. Okay, here we now have a little bit of code. Let's go over it, and we'll start in the end here. What we're doing here is calling the main function. So we go up and we look at the main function. We define a variable number to be 0 to begin with. So we have declared our variable and we know that it's 0 to begin with. And then we try to read a number from the user. So the user inputs a number. But if the user decides to input his name instead of the number, we will get an exception, and that is a value error. And what happens then is that we print this error message so that the user knows that they did something wrong. But if the user manages to enter a floating point number, we will not go in here and print this line under the exception. Instead, we will go to the else. So if everything goes okay in the try, we skip the except and go into the else instead and print this confirmation message here. So let's try to run it and see if we manage to write the code correctly. And let's try with my name. And we can see then, all right, we tried to enter a number, but we did it wrong. So we will jump immediately to this line here under the except value error and print this. But all right, let's try to run it again. And this time I managed to write 4.5. And we see that, all right, everything went well here. Then we skip this one because there was no error, and instead we print the confirmation message. But we're only halfway there because we are missing the loop. So if something goes wrong, we want the user to try again without restarting the script. So I'll modify the code a little bit and then we'll see what I did. And now with the code modified, we can see that we introduced a new variable. We're calling it correct input. And to begin with, the input is not correct because we haven't entered it. So we declare it as false to begin with. Then we added this loop here to say while the input is not correct, we will keep iterating in this loop here. And how do we exit the loop? If we go and look in else here, we say that, all right, if the user managed to input the correct number, we will change correct input to be equal to true, meaning that, all right, when we go up and check the condition again, this will now evaluate to false, and we exit the loop. So let's try it again. Let's try to run it. And if I give something that is not a number, right, we see that we get this error message, but we're also thrown back and given a second chance to enter a number. So if I do enter a correct one, we see that yes, now we exited the loop with this confirmation message printed before we exited. So with this task, what should we take with us? It is important to reflect on what we have, and here are two things, I think, or three. We shall know how to write a try except, so that we can read something from the user, for example, or we can try to write something to a file. But if there is something that can go wrong in the code, it's good to have it in a try except. We shall also take with us that we can have an else in a try except. So, and the else will only be executed if there is no errors in the try block up here. And if everything goes right, we will also do the else. If something goes wrong, we will jump to the except, and then we will skip the else. A last thing, a minor thing maybe, but it is to remember to name our variables correct. If we see here, we have correct input. So when we read this, it is very clear how long we will stay in the loop while not the correct input. So we will stay here until the input is correct.